spinning some wheels. It's at the Federal Reserve Bank in Fort Knox, Kentucky. Yes. It's been converted into. Well, I'll answer that quite honestly. That's one of the reasons I wanted things to get handled, because I know there was like 20 to 60 people that in fact had ordered, and the money's probably sitting in a bank account, not mine. But that was part of my reason for the fact that people made such an honorable commitment immediately to support Christopher's time off to create the symphony that he was in the process of writing. And I think we've closed. I've kind of been able to put the Band-Aid over push the agents aside. It's like, can we just get these things? They're sitting. The tape, the master of the tape, is actually out in a vault, and it's been mixed, and it sounds lovely. So, my honest guess would be probably around Christmas time, only because it just takes that long to get everybody on the phone. No, I promise. It'll be a promise to me that whether Ron knows about it or not, I'll have the tapes out because by the end of the day. I don't do real well with Hollywood agents type peoples, and so I just sort of figured everybody can bark for a year or so, and then we'll make the tapes available. But yeah, that was one of the reasons I sort of spoke with Christopher about it only last week when I said I was coming here. I wanted to be able to say something about it so that everyone that knew about it and made that kind of investment can have an answer. Yes. Very serious.
If there was not a crystal rose in that couch, what was in it?
Oh, did I say that there wasn't a crystal rose in the couch?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, what did I get drinking water about it? You're asking why my couch looks so big? I said it's my mother here. Oh, before that, I said, I was like, you didn't hear. You just want to hear me say it again. Come on. And Rose over there going, forget rock and roll, man. I want to find out where I can write today.
Some of us didn't hear.
I said, so you're curious as to why my pouch was so big. But, when it said sottovoce, it has a very much more subtle delivery. Sottovoce, Italian meaning under one's voice. There was an ivory rose in there. It was actually a carved ivory rose. It was found in an antique shop down in the jewelry district downtown Los Angeles by one of the prop masters. I think it was Bill Dietz. He and his wife actually saw it one day, sort of fleeing around that field. And it was quite lovely. I'm surprised no one has ever seen it. Well, there might have been two, but the one that we used to sort of like, I used to model that because every so often when Vincent would wear it, it was a lovely piece. It was flat on one side, and it was probably about the size, a little larger than a silver dollar. It was quite extraordinary. I'd say it was probably 80 years old, so it was aged nicely and had really nice elevations to it. And did any of the ladies in LA ever get that close to see it out? It was just like throwing a kid. No?
Yeah, Barbara did.
Yeah? And it's funny, it was one of the things I would have loved to have appropriated, but... Well, probably the prop masters or, one of Tony Thomas's kids, but it was their basketball to begin with, so take it home with you when the game's over. Yes!
I don't know if this was ever asked before, but I didn't hear it. Is there one episode that maybe comes to mind that significantly stood out for you because of it took longer, something very unusual took place? I mean, one of those where, boy, if we had every episode that happened in getting it put together, we never would have been able to finish, or I don't know. Just
yeah, well, that's a good question, and I probably have answered this before, but I think it changes over time. It's the fact that some of the brain cells have now regenerated, like lung tissue. And also the fact that from time to time I'll just grab the tape off my shelf and throw it in whichever one it is. And this is going to sound kind of goofy. What was the episode where Williams' last episode? Not Williams' last episode, Winslow. I was just talking with some friends about that, and I was like, there's a lot of stuff that went on during that. First of all, it was the first, again, for people that haven't heard this, most of us that had worked on the show had never worked in television before. So that sort of sets up this, when you work in films, feature films, where most of my career was spent prior to Beauty and the Beast, there's this sort of void that you live in. You work on a project, you work in this ensemble environment for 6 weeks, 6 months, whatever, and then you just disappear and you're on to something else and something else and something else, and at some point later you're reminded by the release of this film that you had a contribution further back. In television, it's not like that at all. Given the case of Beauty and the Beast, it wasn't like that because at some point the feedback caught up to us because we had done X amount of shows in this nebulous void of the universe. Then of course it's released to the world, and then the world sort of starts saying, hey, what happened, I think, by the time we got to that was, there was a groove going on and we were having fun. We sort of found the directors that were most tuned in. And I'm not sure if it was Chris Leach's second or third show, but he directed that. And there was this big body of water that we created on the stage. We were still at Red Bar at that point, and we were on, like, Golden Girls had already wrapped it. So we were on another stage where they built this lake, and it was quite enormous. I would tell you that this body of water is at least the size of this seating area right here, which is a large area to work in. Plus the set piece that went off, that beach that went up, which was too short for the camera. We had a crane that we couldn't actually get in and through because the water, this beach that was created, literally went to the door of the stage, and so on and so forth. Including the fact that we are now losing one of the members of the cast in a way that none of us had experienced before, where we're killing someone off. So there was all this stuff going on in the environment. Plus, this is like something that should, I don't want it to leave the room, okay?
You can trust us.
Saturday in Las Vegas, rumors about asshole. No. Yeah, okay, if Mary Hart breaks into a little thing about this, it's your fault, right? I think at that point, there were a lot of comments about how the crew felt about the director at that point. They weren't all delightful comments. No, they were some pointed comments. So, this is kind of like a strange anecdote. The director was up on the crane. This was Chris Leach, who directed China Moon. What else did Chris direct? Yeah, whatever. He was around for a while. He's actually a very nice guy and a dear friend of mine. But at that time, things were difficult. Because we were all about the same age, and I think Chris was dealing with Linda, who was his age, and Ron, who was his age, and sort of trying to find his place as a director in an environment of sort of like equally experienced, but he was trying to sort of like make his position known because he in fact had the right to be creative choice. But the way he chose to do it often was a little bit difficult for some of us. So he's on this crane, hanging over this lake, and we're misting it in, there's smoke, and guys, it was really quite the circus. But at that point, probably the largest bit of circus work that we had been doing. And we were all hanging on the beach and sitting around there while he was lining up the shot. And Ron had one of these little highway lavalier mics on under his wardrobe. And Pat Mitchell had left the pod open on the sound thing. Chris had these headphones on. So the comments that were being said in this tight little, this guy is such a dick. It was being broadcast to an audience of one, but a very significant. And in fact, at some point during this reign of terror, and it wasn't, what was so funny was, it wasn't just Ron and some of the other actors, it was John Hockridge, who was the first assistant director, who was a very stoic kind of like, he never took sides about anything. So even John was up there like, you think he's an asshole, here he is in the trailer. All of this is kind of being broadcast, a radio-free idiot, and at some point, as the mist is now rising across this pond that we've created there, this booming voice of Chris Leach just sort of echoes through there, going, I heard everything you said! At which point, everyone who was in this little circle turned around and was like, Well, just in case you can't see us, we're over here.